My name's Nigel Morris. I'm Head of Business Development for Catch Power.
This is our mission. It's pretty straightforward. Our goal is to go way beyond just monitoring and into the control space. This is our team. If you haven't met us, our booth's just outside. Please come and say hi. It's pretty enlightening to actually be a provider of this technology and look around the country and have to understand all the different ways that solar is controlled. And this map sort of highlights that. Interestingly, the colour coding on this map is off another version which actually looked at the solar penetration rates around Australia, which is what's driving all of this, right? Our success is actually the very reason that, dynamic control and backstop control and all of these things are in place. So, well done, but it's all your fault for being so successful at solar. But the good part is that we're already seeing some great outcomes from all of this. The downside, I guess, and you can see that in the different mechanisms and the different names for these mechanisms that we have around the country, is that, like most of the solar programs that we've seen over the years, they're not necessarily nationally consistent. Different DNSPs need to do things different ways. They have their own technological constraints and restraints. So we do have a real mishmash. But what is increasingly consistent is the CSIP standard, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. Notably, in the NT and New South Wales, at the moment, there is virtually no backstop, there is no dynamic control. We still have hard export limits in some circumstances, and we also have a different mechanism, if you like, to try and restrict the output of solar through what's loosely termed the solar tax, which is an export price. So different mechanisms in different parts of the country are kind of bad, but they're also good because what we're getting the opportunity to do through these mechanisms is to actually witness which ones are working, which ones are actually doing the job that they were designed to do. So it's a pretty interesting time to be in this space. So going back to the question about, is it bad? And the initial reaction from pretty much everyone in the solar industry when these new programs come into place, be they backstop or dynamic or whatever it is, well, this is bad because everything's changing and now customers have got to do things differently. We've got to do things differently, and that's bad. But aside from the fact that it does add a little bit of cost in some cases, less and less so these days, and it adds a little bit more complexity, and it adds another step in the list of administrative tasks that you all love so dearly. There's a lot of good things about it. You can read them off the screen, but I actually want to give you a real world example of this because I was called by an installer from Queensland the other day, and he was talking to me about the fact that the site that he had just been approved for caused some real challenges for him. In the past, he would have only been able to install a 5 kilowatt system in this particular DNSP area. And he recently applied to put another system in there, put his application into the local DNSP, and instead of being told, yeah, you can put that system in, but it's going to have a 5 kilowatt hard export limit, the DNSP sent back an approval very, very quickly, said, yes, you can connect, you will need to be dynamically connected, but instead of being restricted to 5 kilowatts, you can put a 20 kilowatt system on that one phase site, right? Now, he saw that and actually thought it was a mistake and went back to the DNSP and said, look, I'd love to put 20 kilowatts on, but I think you've made a mistake. You've told me I can put 20 on. They said, no, you can. Please do. So the DNSP explained to him that there are many times of the day when all that energy is valuable to their network. And so they were really happy to lift the limit and allow 4 times more solar to go on that particular connection. So that's great news for the installer, it's great news for the owner, and it's actually great news for the DNSP. And the only mechanism that they needed to manage that as a DNSP was the ability to limit it dynamically when they needed to. So I think if you ever wanted to hear a reason why backstop and dynamic and flexible controls are a good thing, that is the single best story I've ever heard, because it shows these mechanisms not just being a barrier and not just being something that's bad, but actually allowing everyone to get more good outcomes out of that solution. This is why we need it, of course. I'm sure everyone in this room has heard of the duck curve, and the duck curve just continues to get deeper and deeper and deeper everywhere in the country. There are new records set almost on a weekly basis now for how much renewable generation is being created around the country. Rooftop solar is the majority of it in the majority of cases. And so, addressing this and allowing us to help stabilise the duck curve means two things. Number one, you can sell and install larger systems. Number two, the more solar that goes into the network and the more intelligent control we get over it, the more we can dynamically manage this duck curve and continue to grow and continue to install more. So, I think there's a really good case for doing it. We've talked about the fact that Dynamic and Backstop are rolling out in the country, and in fact, because we can do it pretty much across the country, we're involved in these conversations. And of course, this is not fixed. Today, or as of October 1st in Victoria, you've got a backstop mechanism that's come into force, but it's already well and clearly understood, I think, that Dynamic is going to follow at some time down the track. We've already got Dynamic in place in Victoria, in South Australia. There's talk about new programs rolling out in some parts of WA. We've got Dynamic in Queensland. We've got New South Wales talking about either Dynamic or Backstop. So it is inevitable that while we put more solar into the networks, these kinds of mechanisms are going to roll out. And I think it's also, I was chatting with someone in a regulatory capacity just a day or two ago, and we were chatting about the fact that going back a few years, about 6 or 7 or maybe 8 years ago in Queensland, they rolled out DRM as a mandatory obligation for all inverter manufacturers. The industry threw its hands up in a state of despair because there wasn't enough time. We got enough time, and every inverter manufacturer who wanted to sell into Queensland had to put DRM in place. Now, sadly, I'm not aware of a single instance where DRM on inverter control has really actually ever been used, so it was a complete waste of time. But the point that I'm trying to make is that 7 or 8 years ago, they thought DRM was going to be the solution. Turned out not so much. Today, we're seeing Backstop and Dynamic, and that is the flavour of the day, and we have the wonderful CSIP standard that I'll touch on in a sec that's out there. So, while it might have been DRM, while it might be Backstop and Dynamic right now, rest assured, in the future, this will change. It will continue to evolve as new technological solutions become available, as the amount of capacity that's out there in the network needs to be managed in different ways, and of course, aggregating all of this at fleet level becomes possible once all these things are able to be remotely controlled. There's a few really important points there. I won't read through them all, but a couple of them I'm going to touch on particularly, and one is that it's really important to understand that only a single point of control or connection at site, particularly in the Victorian case, are allowed. So if, for example, you choose brand X inverter and you install it and set it up for Backstop, you can't then add a different brand of inverter because inverter brands can't control each other. Luckily, there is a solution in a company that I happen to know quite well who can handle multiple brands. But it is really important for you to know that you can only have a single controller, if you like, at that site, and handling multiple brands is a real challenge. The other stuff, for those of you, just to reiterate, for those of you who weren't in the last session, if you lose internet connectivity, your site will be limited. So you need to get your head around the fact that just like Netflix, just like robot vacuum cleaners, just like Wi-Fi in the home for your mobile devices, internet connection is essential, right? It's just part of the world we live in. Virtually every solar owner in the country wants to understand what's going on. They want to take advantage of the data they can get out of their solar system. And so ensuring that you're helping them to keep internet connected is increasingly essential. The other part about all of this, of course, is that there's a huge opportunity in this by using the intelligence and the hardware and software solutions that are available today, not only to solve this network issue that's growing, but also to actually help consumers to save more by self-consuming more. And ultimately, that is going to be the number one benefit that owners get, because the more that they self-consume, as we all know, the more money they're going to save. So there's a lot of good things that are actually going to come out of this. There are a lot of analogies and terms that are being thrown around, and I just want to highlight one, which is CSIP. If you haven't heard of it, it means Common Smart Inverter Protocol. These are some details about it, and for those of you who are unaware, this was actually developed in conjunction with a lot of the OEM manufacturers of hardware. There were a lot of stakeholders from right across the industry, including the solar industry, which we're all a member of, to help develop this standard. And actually, we interviewed a guy called Joey Kassouf on Just Another Solar podcast the other day, and talking about the fact that CSIP is actually one of the best standards in the world for doing this level of control. Australia is leading the world in how to handle this level of penetration because of our super high penetration rates. So we actually have and now do have a really, really good standard. It's really worthwhile also noting that CSIP is not just about limiting solar production or solar generation at various times of the day or the year when the network is suffering stress. It actually also has the ability to limit demands. So in the same way that DRM can be used to limit an air conditioner in some parts of Australia, CSIP is used in Queensland right now, every day, to limit the demand that's put on the network by EV/SE chargers. Now, again, this arguably might be overreach, it might be a little bit conservative, but what this does put in place is a mechanism that is future-proofing the network. It's future-proofing your consumers' ability to charge their EVs when they want to and get full power out of it when they need it, and not have arbitrary hard limits like we used to have. And that's the wonderful thing about the technology that is available to us today. How, in our particular case, and I'm doing this because a lot of people have said to us, okay, great, we know that Catch Power can do some of the dynamic and backstop control. How does it actually work? How do you actually set it up? I'm not going to go through in heaps of detail, and I can share these slides with anyone afterwards. But essentially, we have a configuration app called the Configurator that allows you to scroll through, add the details, set the owner up, and then connect across to the dynamic control portal. In the Configurator, all you need to do is go down to the instructions are all there. I won't read through it. But the way that we do this is by actually making the connection for everybody that we're helping in this scenario by using the NMI, which is connected to the DNSP, to the owner. So we connect the dots, but using the NMI as the reference case, if you like, to connect the site up and say, here's the site, here's the details of what's being installed, let's now get this set up. So it's that NMI number that automatically populates a whole lot of data. Once you put the solar size in, we then connect to the DNSP for you, confirm a whole lot of things. If you've got everything right, you get a bunch of green ticks, and you are pretty much then done. Once that's done, you can simply go through and complete the configuration in the rest of our app. And one of the things that we worked really hard on, well, actually I haven't worked hard on it at all, Jason has. Jason did all the work. But one of the things that we've tried to do is to show what those limits are actually doing in real time. So you will see, a grey line. You'll see little figures that pop up that demonstrate exactly what is going on, so that the owner and yourself are not left in the dark when it comes to what export limits have been put in place. There are a number of different technologies that we use and different methods that we use to connect sites together to try and help overcome some of these problems. We have a very unique solution called cloud tethering that allows us, for example, to remotely connect from a remote retail meter point, the boundary of the property, for example, to an inverter that's down on the shed or somewhere remotely. And we can wirelessly send those control commands, be it for a hard export limit, be it for telling a battery to charge or discharge, or be it for triggering an event similar to such as Backstop. So we can do that wirelessly using our cloud control. We can also now start integrating these other things. And again, this comes back to the discussion about the fact that when we get to the point where driving self-consumption into the home is essential, the way that you can solve that is by automation. And that's what we aim to do. So in this case, for example, I'm showing an EV/SE charger. we can also blend EVSE charges and take control of them so that we can now apply a load to ensure that you're consuming that excess solar rather than exporting it or being cut off from an export limit because of some restriction in the network. We can do the same thing with hot water, of course, with contactors, so that's just another scenario. And in fact, this is one of my favourite little images, if you like, of the world that for anyone in solar who's been doing this for 5 or 10 years and who's talked about or dreamt about the dream of being able to orchestrate all these different loads and generation devices and batteries in a home. I love what this image describes because we're controlling an inverter and battery. We can connect to Amber if we need to. We can, of course, control loads like hot water through a contactor. We can connect to EVSEs wirelessly and ramp the EVSE up and down. We're, of course, providing a monitoring solution. And with our latest hardware, we can now also reach into air conditioners and control them via DRM. So we can now orchestrate a whole manner of different devices in the home, saving homeowners money, putting load on the network to avoid exports going out, which prevents voltage going up, which means you sell larger systems, which means you make more money, and we all go to the Bahamas together. So I look forward to that. There's a whole lot more that we can do. We can do multiple brands, as I mentioned. We can do mixed phases of systems, and in fact, this is an area that we really specialise in. Talking with some of the, a lot of installers who've come to visit us today have highlighted the fact that some of the OEMs can't handle, for example, split phase with their own metering solutions. So we've developed metering solutions for that. And then, of course, behind that, you need to have a software platform. And so, again, I'm conscious I don't want to drag you through every detail of every screen, but what we have is quite an amazing software architecture that allows you to commission this, allows us to use some AI to help you commission it now. We've got a wizard and a commissioner that is an AI-derived tool sitting in the background. You need visibility of it all, so there's graphs and whatnot. You need smart capabilities like the ability to exclude a battery from discharging into a large air conditioner because it doesn't make sense. You want to keep that battery for the evening. So exclude the battery and save that energy for later on. So there's all sorts of different functionalities that are built in for you to customise the behaviour of systems for your homeowners and also for those homeowners to adapt to the inevitable changes that come along over time. That's an overview. And I want to say, although obviously I think we've got a fantastic solution, there are some other fantastic providers out there working just as hard as us to bring these new hardware and software solutions to the market. The next few years look really, really exciting.